right, Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the men's Roman study. We're going to study book of Romans. This is one of the very important books to emphasize on righteousness by faith, justification by faith, however you want to reveal it. But it's extremely intertwined with our walk and with Torah and with faith. So we need to make sure that we're clarifying for the people that's watching. Questions is definitely welcome, especially when we're going over Romans. But we're going to start with the introduction from some good information that Brother Rod found. So Brother Rod is going to bring that introduction in.
Yeah, just continuing on what Brother Jadiel was saying, Romans is the most comprehensive expression of theology in the Bible. I was telling Nate earlier, if I could choose one book to have, it would be Romans. If I had to choose, it just is complete in all of doctrine and all that we believe and all that we're to do. And how, as coming out of Acts just rolls out the red carpet, for us to enter into Romans, written by Yasharal and written to the believers in Rome. So it's specifically written to believers in what they believe. As we watch Acts and we watch the Ruach come down and we watch the men operate the way Yahuah wanted them to operate, and we watch Paul preach, now we see what he was preaching, right? So the basis of Romans comes out of Habakkuk 2:4, which says, the just shall live by faith. And it's interesting how Jadiel and I talked and how we're going to do Romans and then Galatians. But Habakkuk 2:4 says, but the just shall live by faith on the second part of the verse, and how Romans is the just, Galatians is shall live, because it talks about how to live, Galatians 3:11, and then Hebrews 10:39 says the just shall live by faith, and how that is the book of faith. So, and that ushers in the whole chapter 11, where it talks about all these patriarchs and the faith that we are to have. So the first 8 chapters are all doctrine, so we'll learn about our faith. In the first 3 chapters is a complete diagnosis of sin. It tells us of sin from every aspect, from every man, from the heathen to the religious man, to the man on the moon, to the man on the island, whatever aspect you come from in life, it addresses sin. The next 2 chapters, it talks about salvation. The next 3 chapters after that, completing the first 8 chapters, deals with sanctification. And then 9, 10, and 11, we're going to look at Israel. And then the final chapters, based upon everything that we saw in the justification and the sanctification, in the salvation and in Israel, how then we live, so it's the practical application of all those things. And I think it's important that we not lose sight as we dig deep, because Romans forces you to dig deep. It forces you to look at Torah. It forces you to see what it is you believe and how to live it. But the important thing is that this is a personal letter to every last one of us, and not to get lost in the depth, but to take it personal and to live it personal. It's a personal declaration to us. Justification and righteousness meet, and we'll find out how as we go along. So I just wanted to kind of usher us in to give us an idea of what Romans entails and to get excited about what we're about to get into. So praise Yah.
Ooh, yeah. Now, so we got 32 verses in the first chapter of Romans. We're going to read probably in groups of 8. So we're going to look at this in groups of 8. I'm going to take the first 8 verses. We're in Romans chapter 1. We're going to look at the first 8 verses. Wesley, you had your hand up?
It was to read, but since you're reading the first 8, you can go ahead.
Now you got the next 8.
Okay, that's good.
So, prophetic volunteering. I like that. All right. So Romans chapter 1, first 8 verses. It says, Paul, a servant of Yahusha the Messiah, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of Elohim, which he had promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his son Yahusha the Messiah, our master, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of Elohim with power, according to the Ruach, the Spirit of holiness, or set apartness, by the resurrection from the dead, by whom we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations for his name, among whom are you also the called of Yahushua the Messiah. To all that be in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called to be holy ones, grace to you and peace from Elohim our Father and from the Master Yahushua the Messiah. And he says, first, I thank my Elohim through Yahushua the Messiah for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. All right. So I'm going to open this up, let everybody point out what they see. Whoa, Wesley, that was pretty fast. Come on, Nate, you're slipping. All right, go ahead, Wes. That was pretty fast. You may have something.
You can go ahead. You said you're going to open up.
Huh?
You can go ahead. You said you were going to open up.
Oh, no. I was going to let whoever wants to point out anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And your hand went up super fast.
So I like to point out verse 2,
Okay.
where it says, which he had promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, or the Word. And when I read that, it's pointing to what most people call the Old Testament. They're pointing back to what the prophets were talking about. Right. And what was promised, it was the gospel of God, the Messiah. And so what he's talking about here, or the gospel found in the Old Testament as well. It's not something brand new. It's just something that's coming into understanding, or he's bringing more understanding. So a verse I like to say to connect to it would be Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2. And it says, Hebrews chapter 3 is talking about the Israelites sojourning in the wilderness. And then in chapter 4, verse 2, it talks about, I'll read 1 and 2, and it says, let us therefore fear, lest the promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So again, he was referring to them, is referring to the Israelites that he was just talking about in chapter 3. And then he talks about what we had this gospel, but what was the issue? The issue was faith.
No, absolutely. I like verse 2, pulling out the fact that when you look at Hebrews chapter 3, it's talking about the wilderness after Mount Sinai. So when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, Paul says that the gospel was given to them, just like it's given to us. Rod, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Was it 1 Corinthians 15? Breaks that down too. I don't want to interrupt your thought though. If you were finished with your thought, because I was looking at verse 1.
Oh no, I could remember.
Verse 1. Out the door, he calls himself a bondservant, a doulos, specifically speaking to those in Rome, knowing the difference between what they saw as slavery, which was forced. He's saying he's a volunteer. He volunteers to be a slave for Yahusha Messiah. And he's pointing back to Exodus 21. I'll read a few verses. It says, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, in the 7th he shall go free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she born him sons and daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and she shall go out by himself. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free, then his master shall bring him into the judges. He shall also bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. So he, it reminds me of Mr. Clean. Mr. Clean, remember the old pictures of Mr. Clean? He had that earring. He was a doulos. He was a servant. I remember when I used to, when I was in the church, I'll be the only one sitting up there with an earring, and I used to say, I'm a doulos. You know what I mean? I'm a servant of the Most High Yah, So he's saying from the jump, I'm not forced into slavery. I'm volunteering to serve Yahusha Messiah. So I thought that was right out the bat. That was a statement that needed to be recognized as well.
I think that's so interesting. When we're looking at most of his letters begin with him referencing how he's a bond servant unto the Messiah. And it's interesting that you bring out that Torah aspect of a servant, because it says that when they bore their ear, it says if he loved his master.
He loved his master.
And he bore his ear, and then his master's supposed to treat him as a son. Mm-hmm. Especially since he gave his daughter to the servant. And most people have the misconception of the slave, the word slave, when it's translated slave. There's some Bibles where it's translated slaves. Right. It says if the slave love his master, but it also says if the master gave his daughter to the slave, so we see the reciprocated treatment. One is not just getting, the slave is not getting a horrible treatment. He's actually being treated as a son, and the master gives his daughter. But I like the correlation to the master, to the Messiah, because to me, the principle, it's so connected to us loving our master and not wanting to go out. And then it's interesting, the marriage dynamic. There's so many issues going on with relationships that start out in following the Messiah, and then one of them decides to leave. But then it says if you have a family in the master, you could leave, but your family stays with the master. It's just I like that picture of if a person decides to leave the master, then their family, if they desire to stay, their family doesn't necessarily have to be disconnected just because the man decided to leave, to leave them. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of stuff is happening like that, with amongst my friends that I know,
Yeah. Also Yehuda in the camps, if you were a slave, it was an honor to wear that earring. Like it's a complete difference from what slavery became. Right. And how the same scriptures were being used. Right. Talking about something completely different than what scripture talks about. So people need to be educated on that as well, on what slavery was. Like you said, servantry. It was a worker. It was an employee relationship. Even better at times. Like you said, they were family. They loved to do it. They wanted to do it. They loved to go to work. It says if he loved his master, he wanted to stay. He put that post in his ear. He stood by the door with the post until his master released him. So praise Yah.
Yeah, no, that's it's good to know, because there's a lot of misconceptions. And one of the ways that they try to discredit scriptures is by using the slavery verses without context. Mm-hmm. So praise Yah that it's voluntary, and that even now we see Paul saying that he is a slave of Yahusha, the Messiah, voluntarily. Go ahead, Brother Kevin.
Would that apply the other way if the man wants to stay a slave and his family wants to go out?
Well, I think because the way that the nation worked at that time, I don't think that it was even economically possible for the woman and the children to go off out of the nation and go do something else. It would be far-fetched in society at that time. And I'm not even talking about just Israel. I'm talking about most nations. The women wouldn't really just leave their nation or to go start. It would usually be the man that would go off into another area and start their life. When we look at the book of Ruth, it was these two men of Judah that left with their mother and went to Moab. And that's how we got Ruth, because they went into Moab, started another life. And then when they died, you had the women come back to the nation. They came back to be in the midst of the nation that they were once a part of, so they can be taken care of, so I don't know. I mean, I would assume, because when we're looking at Torah and the instructions, they do work both ways. But the culture would be different. Like, it would be the man working in the field and the woman taking care of the children in the home. So.
And to add to that, the protection of that woman, that child, was only in the camp. Once that woman left that camp, she was wide open to whatever happened. You know what I mean? To be used and abused, literally. So it would not have been customary, nor like a common thought, like Josh said, for her to leave, unless it was an extreme case. And if that was the case, then some discipline had to happen, to figure all that out. So I agree with Josh said.
All right. So we have the promise before by the prophets in the Holy Scripture concerning his son. Concerning his son. I like the way it talks, because even though Messiah is raised from the dead, he's still a son. He's still the son of Yah. And all the messages that we find in the prophets are Yah revealing things concerning his son for us to understand. So this is one of the things that we have to grasp, because we're looking at faith as a dynamic thing, like this is a new situation going on. But it says that the scriptures before time is actually revealing things concerning his son all along. You see? So a lot of the prophets and a lot of the patriarchs already fully believed in the coming of the son, in the promise of the son. That's what it says in verse 2, which he had promised before time. And I like Wesley pointed out, it says the gospel of God, the Father. This is the good news of the Father, that the Father promised before time concerning his son. Verse 3, which was made of the seed of David, or the promises to come through the seed of the line of David according to the flesh. So it's very interesting to make sure that we're very consistent in recognizing what we believe that the Father is promising us. One, the Father promised us the Messiah. The Messiah is a promised son to us from the beginning. The prophets and the patriarchs knew of the Messiah. The Messiah coming and everyone not knowing, it's because they decided to move away from the truth. And the Messiah and John the Baptist and the disciples are actually now restoring the truth back to where it was. This is not something new, even though it sounds new, but it only sounds new because everyone has forgotten what was already told to them before time and by the prophets. So it may sound like it's some type of dispensation, but it's absolutely not, because Paul, in the very beginning of Romans, said that the promise was given to us already before. And Wesley pulled out Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2, which says that even the Israelites at Sinai, when they was in the wilderness, received the good news. So we cannot even disconnect the idea that they did not have no idea who the Messiah was. So it's very important for us to grasp. Faith has always been the key to receive righteousness. And like Brother Rod said, all the way when you get to Hebrews, it starts out with Abel. The patriarchs of faith starts out with Abel. You see what I'm saying? So we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about some type of dispensation, when stuff started or when stuff ended. No, faith has always been the key since the beginning, since the beginning of the downfall of man. So faith is not some new thing. Righteousness being imputed because of faith is not some new thing. This has always been the way to restore mankind back to their rightful position as the children of Elohim. Go ahead, Brother Emeka.
Yeah, can you hear me clear?
It started again, but I could hear you so far.
It's choppy.
Yeah, it's choppy.
It's choppy. Real quick, I'll call right in.
Okay, all right, no problem. All right, and when you call, just take us back to wherever you at. We're gonna move forward to the next 8 verses, but you could go back to whatever you wanted to point out. We only read the first 8 verses of Romans chapter 1.
You want me to follow up with that, the expanded Greek, the first 8?
You said verse 8? Well, hold on.
The first 8, remember we talked about that?
Oh, the first 8?
To see what it says here in the expanded Greek?
Yeah, let's check it out.
All right. So it says, Paul, a bondslave by nature, belonging to Yahusha Messiah, an ambassador by divine summons, permanently separated to Yahuwah's good news, which he promised aforetime through the intermediate agency of his prophets in holy writings concerning his son, who came from the ancestral line of David so far as his humanity is concerned, who was demonstrated in the sphere of the power of his son, of power as son of Yahuwah, so far as his divine essence was concerned by the resurrection of the dead, Yahusha Messiah, our master, through whom we receive grace and apostleship, in order that there may be obedience to the faith among all the Gentiles in behalf of his name, among whom you also are divinely summoned ones belonging to Yahusha Messiah, to all who are in Rome, Yahuwah's loved ones, divinely summoned saints. Grace to you and peace from Yahuwah our Father and our Master Yahusha Messiah. First, I am constantly thanking my Elohim through Yahusha Messiah concerning all of you because of your faith. It's constantly being spread abroad in the whole world. For my witness is Yahuwah, to whom I render sacred service in my spirit in the good news concerning his son.
I like that. I like that thorough breakdown. Leaves no wiggle room for any deviation from the simplicity of what it's saying, I wanted to also point out, well, let me let Emeka go. He had his hand up. I think that sounded good. Go ahead, Emeka.
Yeah. So, it's very interesting because right now I'm putting together a lesson on grace. And, this is a portion where, we see grace being, Paul preaching to the Romans about grace, well, at least bringing them into the, idea or mentioning of grace and welcoming them into the grace of Yahusha. And, it's so interesting because when you look at grace, it was something that like when I look at it, I look back at like Noah, kind of to like your discussion on belief. I look back to Noah, right? Just going back to Noah and his belief. And it says that, you know, Noah found grace in the sight of Yahuah. And so when you look at that, you know, by default, you know, or just by, you know, just the way of life and occurrences, his children, Ham, Sheth, and Japheth, they all were able to partake, you know, or receive grace through Noah. Like Noah was the reason, you know, and they partook in that same grace. You know, they themselves didn't deserve it, you know, or earn it, I should say, but they gained it through Noah. And so, you know, when I see grace being mentioned here, you know, grace is a lot of things, something that people take out of context, and they think, oh, we got this, you know, we got this grace now. We're, you know, we know Paul's definitely going to expound on this later, but grace was earned by Yahusha. You know, he received grace from Yah, you know, through his walking righteously and perfect before him. And by that, we all, by Yahusha's work and his righteous standing, we have all received, you know, we can all be beneficiaries of that grace, you know, and then be able to benefit, you know, through the promises of what's going to happen now that Yahusha has received that grace from Yah, you know. And so I just, you know, for me, I have a much, you know, fuller understanding of grace, what it is, you know, and you know, what it means to us, you know, than I did before, you know. I have a solid more conclusion, but I just, you know, I really love, you know, just like, I really, you know, I look at Paul and his writings, I'm just like, man, like Paul knew what he was saying. I know some parts he gets, you know, all over the place, but Paul knew exactly what he was saying. He knew, you know, speaking through the Ruach, the Ruach was using him to say exactly what he needed to say. And so, you know, just seeing him speak about grace here is something that we should always appreciate and know exactly what it is and how we benefit from it. You know, it's not that we've earned it, but we have been able to benefit from the grace that Yahusha had. So, you know.
Right. I like that you clarify what you were saying, because you said earned quite a few times pertaining to grace. And Yahusha didn't earn grace. Yahusha, yeah, it's as if Yahushua is the grace. He is the grace that we receive. That's why we receive grace through him, not because he earned it, but because he was the grace. He was the sacrifice that was sent in order for grace to be applied to those who believed. Grace and works are two different things. Later on in Romans chapter 4 talks about the difference between grace and debt. Like when we work, the reward is not based off of grace. When you look at Romans 4:4, it says, now to him that works is the reward not given by grace, but by debt. That means that if you work for it, that means Yah owes it to you. It's not a gift anymore. So Noah, he didn't do anything to earn grace. He received grace because of his belief. That's the only way that grace can be received. You know, because if you do something, then Yah owes it to you. Then it's not grace anymore. You know, then it's debt. Then it's Yah has a debt that he has to pay because you earned it. So it's just like if you go to work and you earn your money, it's like your boss actually owes you. You know, so you get paid not because he's like, oh, I blessed you with a job. Like, no, he pays you because you earned it. So he has to pay you. But as far as grace is concerned, nobody earns grace. All have sinned. No one is righteous. No, not one. And we're going to see that in Romans 2. He's going to expound on that. But I like that you clarified at the end, like not that he earned it, but there's something, the belief is what's pulling him towards the grace. And I know what you're trying to say, because I heard you say it before. So I know that that earn is not the good word to use when considering grace, because then earn implies that I did something to gain it. I did something, now that belongs to me. When in actuality, grace is given because you believe, is a gift. It's a gift given to you. It's yours, but it's a gift. No one can boast about what they've done. But I believe I understand what you're saying as far as Noah's son reaping the benefits of the grace that Noah received by his belief. So by his belief, his children, and that's the same thing with our children. You're absolutely right, Mecca. When we enter into the covenant, our children is also involved in the covenant. It says to you and your seed. So you're absolutely right. By faith, by our faith, our children is actually partaking in the grace that Yah has blessed us with. So that's an excellent point that you brought up, because there's a whole bunch of conversations on that too. Like, are the children saved? Or no, the children are not saved until, no. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says that if we are believers, then our children are automatically set apart because I'm a believer. Not because they've chosen anything, but because I'm a believer. If they last until the age of accountability, Yah will approach them and reveal himself to them like he did with Jacob. So I like that point, because that point is missing a lot of times in a lot of these conversations going on around here. All right. Oh, go ahead, Brother Rod.
Yeah. No, I what you just shared with Fameka was very important. And I think one of the other things that's often happens, and is a mistake that's made in understanding what grace is that it's often mistaken for mercy. Those two words are used interchangeably. You talked earlier about dispensation. The dispensationalists believe that we are now in the dispensation of grace, completely not understanding grace is receiving, like you said, something that you don't, like you didn't do anything to get this grace. You're receiving something you don't deserve, something you didn't earn. Mercy is not getting what you do deserve. And that's what Yah is putting up with now. All of those that are not following him, they're receiving mercy. This is not grace. You know what I mean? Right. So it's a good point, to bring that out to Mecca, since you're doing a study on that, to show the difference between the two, because that's mistaken and leads people down the wrong road as well.
Absolutely. Everybody receives mercy. Not everybody accepts grace. You see, receiving mercy, whether they like it or not, these wicked people walking around, they receive mercy, whether they like it or not, because Yah's he waits. We receive mercy. When we were in the world doing wicked things, he waited. He gave us mercy, whether we liked it or not. But when he offered the grace, we have to receive it. We have to take it from him as a gift. Not everybody takes it. And when you reject the grace, when he desires, he will pull back his mercy. So that's an excellent study to break down the difference between grace and mercy. Because just because we get grace and mercy doesn't mean everybody who receives mercy gets grace. All right. Wesley, you said you was going to read, brother. Verse 8 to 16. Well, verse 9 to 16.
You
was going to correct me.
I mean, there was a mistake and it had to be fixed. So verse 9 to 16, it says, "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request, if by any means now I might have a prosperous journey by the will of God to come unto you. For I long to see you, that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift, to the end ye may be established. That is that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both you and me. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I proposed to come unto you, but was let hitherto. Okay.
Hitherto.
Hitherto, that I might have some fruit. I mean some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. I am debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. So as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek.
Okay, now you was breaking up a little bit, but we was reading with you. You want to point something?
Yes, I want to point something out. I just have to decide which one to do, so I don't take too long.
All right.
So I don't do a bunch of pointing out.
Yeah,
So
there's some stuff.
I guess no, okay, I'll point out verses 11 and 12, and then leave the other side. So what I want to point out is that in 11 and 12, first of all, I see that, like, you see how much Paul is drawn to be a part, to be with the brethren. Like he's drawn to it. He longs for this. And I really like in verse 11 and 12 together, because he wants to be with them to impart unto them some gift. Now you're probably wondering what spiritual gift is that, and the spiritual gift he's referring to is explained in verse 12 when it says, that is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both you and me. And what's cool is that in verse 11 it says, impart unto you spiritual gift, to the end ye may be established. And the word established can mean strengthened, encouraged, to stand. So yeah, it was nice that he really wanted to be with the brethren. He longed for it, and at the same time to impart the spiritual gift of encouragement, or encouraging one another, or strengthening one another. So
praise Yah. It's interesting is that 1 Corinthians chapter 12 says one of the spiritual gifts is actually faith. Faith is actually a spiritual gift, and the reason why it's a spiritual gift is because some people have that ability to strengthen someone else's faith. Some people don't know how to communicate that. They're better at a study or doing it through a sermon or something. But there's individuals who have that gift to impart that strength in faith, to boost another person's faith to the point where it says here, verse 11, that they are established as a result of it. The end, you may be established, meaning that the result of us coming together is that you are established, like you are grounded, you're ready. And it's a blessing to keep these spiritual gifts in mind. When we go over Corinthians, we probably have a lot to talk about, because most people don't even realize that one of the gifts of the Spirit is faith, or strengthening the faith of another. And Paul is executing that gift, or desiring to go there so he could. But you can see he's doing that everywhere he goes, and I think that the more that we learn about that, the more we're able to do it, because Paul tells us to go seek after those gifts as well. Is not just for one person or two people. We can actually obtain other gifts by the Ruach, by the Spirit, so no, absolutely. I like that. I love that. And this is one of the things about the feasts. This is what enables the people of Yah to come together and strengthen each other's faith, to establish them until the next feast, or until whenever. What if we don't see each other? That time that we have together is to establish one another, and comfort one another, like it says in verse 12. So praise Yah for that pointing out. Brother Rod, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I definitely like the mutual. I thought you were really going to go in on that, Wesley, because like Josh said, the building up of faith, the mutual it was coming from both sides. Like, he was going to be strengthened too. Like, it wasn't just him strengthening them, they were strengthening him. And if I'm correct, a lot of these believers he hadn't even met yet. So it was like us, like when I remember the first feast we met, you know what I mean? And we were talking to each other on Zoom, on the telephone. We hadn't seen, but I think you and Keturah, y'all came to my house first before the feast. But it was just like, man, the anticipation. Like, and I just remember even after that, when we were going to the feast, we were just so excited, you know. So, but Wesley, I was going to tell you, the next time you do those two verses together, add 10 in there, because 10, he says, making requests if by some means, in other words, if by any means, now at last I may find my way by the will of Yahuah to come to you. So he was like, I'm coming, because remember, it took him from the time he wrote it, it took him 3 years to get there. If we look through the book of Acts, he went to prison. He got bitten by a snake. You know what I mean? He was sick, you know, and he went through all those things to finally get there. And then I think when he came, he was in chains, right? So by any means necessary, I like to say, he was going to make his way to Rome to see these people, to see these brothers and sisters, not only to encourage them, but so that they can encourage him too. So the mutual aspect of that. So I just want to put that in there.
I like the fact that you brought up the mutual, because many people we don't look at the prophets. We don't look at Moses. We don't look at Messiah as receiving from others. Right. You know, when you look at Messiah's life, the reason why he wanted the disciples to be awake during Gethsemane praying is because he wanted to receive from them. He wanted to be comforted by his brothers. And he wasn't able to, you know what I mean? The Messiah was not able to be comforted by the ones that he wanted to be comforted by, you know? So it's a blessing that Messiah went through that pain to establish a people that will do that for one another and not leave one another without that comfort, you know? So that way we won't have to literally feel that aloneness, that complete aloneness that Messiah had, the magnitude, let me just say that, the magnitude of what the Messiah had to deal with, having nobody by his side. Nobody, everybody ran, you know. But then when we look on the book of Acts, we have the disciples going into jail 2 by 2, you know, being killed right beside one another, being whipped right beside one another, you know what I mean, rather than being alone. I mean, we do see that at times, but Yah always sends comfort because he knows how his son felt when he was there, you know. So that's just real comforting for me, you know, to recognize as well. I wanted to also focus on 14, right? 14 says, I'm a debtor. He says, I'm a debtor to both Greeks and barbarians, meaning, the Greeks meant Greek and Latin that was dwelling in Jerusalem. Barbarians was referring to foreigners, people outside of that. So there was more than just Greeks that they were referring to. They were talking to a whole bunch of different nationalities. That he's a debtor to the Greeks, to the foreigners, to the wise, to the unwise. And then he says, so as much as is in me, as much as I can do, I'm ready to teach, to spread the good news to you that are at Rome also. So it's like, we got to think about the energy that we use in this work, you know, the energy that we put forth in this work. You know, I could see Paul talking to one person the same way he talks to 10 person, the same way he talks to 100 people, same way he talks to kings, same way he talks to a peasant, same way he would talk. You know, I could look through the book of Acts to see him in jail talking to a soldier, and then he's talking to a king, the same exact way, the same exact passion. And we need to make sure that we're not switching up because of we don't got the crowd or something like that. We need to be a debtor. We have to owe. If we have truth, you owe it to give it to someone else. That's just it. You know, if we're not going to be debtors, then you're going to be selfish. and you're going to be lingering. It's only for you, and that's not what it's for. It's given to us to be a light to the world, the way that the Israel of old was supposed to do. So now we have to now complete that task and be a light, and not put it under a bushel like Messiah said, but put it on the stand so it can light up the whole house. Rod, you wanted to say something?
Debtor, I was just looking at his life, and debtor literally means obligated by duty. Like, and you could think of all the reasons he would be obligated. The fact that he spoke against Yahusha, the fact that he now was speaking to possibly brothers who he had before that he wanted to bring over to understand who Yahusha Messiah was. And now that he was a bond slave to Yahusha by duty, by moral obligation, and spiritual obligation. So that's a powerful word to use, a debtor. And do we approach it that way? Do we approach our lives that way? Like he said, do we look at every opportunity as I'm indebted? I'm obligated to do this. I'm obligated to say this. Do we second guess, or do we go forward what Yahuwah told us to do? So powerful word there.
Praise Yah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying earlier too, with what Emeka was saying about the grace thing. In reality, all of us are the debtors to Yah, not the other way around. But you were saying that, talking about the magnitude of him, being alone and everything. And then you talked about them being, even the disciples, when they were persecuted, it was, usually 2 by 2. But even when they were alone, like when you look at Stephen, Messiah was still there with them, his presence, which is why he said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. So in reality, never, no one's ever going to be alone who is his, because he'll be there with them regardless. And then, what was the other thing? Something else. I forgot what the other thing was.
No, but what you said is good, because I was looking at the physical, but you're absolutely right. Matthew, the last verse of Matthew 28, where it says, behold, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. But Messiah made the statement, why have thou forsaken me? He went through that feeling of emptiness, and then tells us we don't ever have to feel that. Even when we look at the dark ages, we see believers being killed in lions' dens singing, because of what you said, Mike. They was not alone. Messiah was there comforting them, and Messiah had to go through feeling like Yah was not with him. So that was the difference, So praise Yah, we would never have to feel that because of Messiah.
The other thing was just another witness from Paul confirming what he was saying, about the gospel being preached on Sinai. I think that's another reason why he always says to the Jew first. But he was talking about sharing the gospel to the Jew first and to the Greek, or sharing the faith. But to the Jew first and to the Greek, going back to what he said, because it was first given to them, talking about the gospel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. In regards to Sinai and in regards to Messiah coming through the line of Judah, even Messiah was given to them first, physically, and his message as well. John the Baptist was given to them first, so absolutely. There has to be a recognition of the steps that Yah takes, and even now, I believe that all those who claim to be believers, those are individuals who the Ruach, the Spirit, is going to try to compel first to dive deeper in Scripture. Getting all those who claim to be Messiah followers to recognize what Scripture actually says, to see if we'll correct ourselves, to see if we'll submit ourselves and humble ourselves under that authority. And then those individuals will go out to the world of individuals that have no clue. So I believe he still works the same way. to the believer first, or to those who are, acknowledge him first, then the nations, the Gentiles encompasses every other person, Nate, go ahead, brother.
You kind of took it from my mouth. Verse 16, that kind of goes with what you're saying, that, it's to everyone who believes, it's not necessarily right belief at the right time, but gives the power to those who believe, like me and most of us here, he brought us from where we were because of our belief.
Right.
Because of either we did or we were so studious or whatever, but it's because our belief that he brought us to the place where we could humble ourselves and say, Abba Yah,
No, absolutely.
That's I think where it comes from. And then it's to everybody, not just
right
a certain group of people. I always say that every time I see that, is because unfortunately, there are those who think it's only for certain people. But it's for everyone who believes. And that's pretty much, I can't say
I didn't take that out of your mouth. I absolutely overlooked that verse. That verse is pretty clear. To everybody that believes, the Jew first and then the Greek. So this verse, I mean, I know I said it, but I needed that verse. So now it's kind of like, you can't really go around thinking like, okay, yeah, just because you're a Jew, Yah's going to come to you and be like, yeah, come. No. Everybody he's going to come to. But those who believe, he's going to come to go deeper. Yeah. Remember, judgment starts where?
In the house of Yah.
The house of Yah. Judgment starts in the house of Yah. So he's going to come to his house first to judge. So, of course, he's going to come to his house first to bring us to more light.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But who's in his house? All those who believe, the Jew and the Greek.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So, absolutely.
That's who my brother, my sister is. Who's
right?
Not, there are going to be those of the Yahudim who are not going to believe. They didn't do it then, and they're not going to do it now.
Absolutely.
They claim that they believe. They don't really believe, and because they're off doing other stuff. But it's those who have, righteous faith, or
right,
that will do it.
Right, and then say those who have the same doctrines. Those who have the same beliefs. Matter of fact, Messiah said that clear. He says, those who are my sheep that are not of this fold.
Yeah.
I will call them, and then they will be one fold, and they would have one shepherd. So he's clear on saying that he has sheep that know his voice in different places. So we have to be very clear that those who believe does not necessarily mean they have the same doctrine. Yeah. So you got to be very careful as to discounting someone because of their beliefs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Praise Yah for that, Nate. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, like you said, judgment starts in the house of Yah. It made me think of Messiah going to the temple. And he was removing people from the temple. Those were Jews, So I still see that as an image, or a foreshadow, I guess, or whatever.
You're right.
Of what's going to happen. Not that it's only going to be, Hebrews or whatever, Jews or whatever, but still the point is he goes to the house first, and people will be removed that believe and that are Jews.
Absolutely. Let me say it in case people didn't hear it in the video. Messiah going to clearing out the temple, cleansing the temple. He removed people from the house of Yah that were Yahudim, that were Jews, and he removed them from the house of Yah because of what they were making it into. So likewise, he's going to remove those from his house, but he's also going to call those to his house as well. Matter of fact, there's many prophecies that say Israel is going to be a house. Matter of fact, that verse that Messiah said when he was cleansing the temple was for all nations. The scripture says that my house will be a house of prayer for all nations, it says. when we go back to the original verse. So if anybody could find that, so it could be on the video, that'll be good. When he said, my house will be a house of prayer, you made into a den of thieves. There's a scripture actually that says, my house will be a house of prayer for all nations. I'm not sure if that's in Isaiah 56 or something.
I think it's Isaiah.
Yeah, so if somebody could find that, so we could have that in the recording for a little emphasis. All right.
Jeremiah 7.
You said Jeremiah 7?
Yes.
What verse?
11.
Jeremiah 7, verse 11?
I thought this is what I...
It says, is part of it, it said it once. It says, is this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, even I have seen it, saith Yah.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm looking for.
Yeah. But there's one that says, house of prayer for all nations. Let's look at the next 8 verses. Somebody wants to read verse 19 to 24. Is it 19 to 24?
17.
17 to 24.
Before you move on, it's Isaiah 56, verse 7.
Isaiah 56. I knew it was Isaiah 56. There's a lot in that chapter alone. Verse 7, it says, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar. For my house shall be called the house of prayer for all people. Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Rod.
All right. So 17 to what?
17 to 24.
Okay. For therein is the righteousness of Yahuwah, revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. For the wrath of Yahuwah is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men, who hold truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of Yahuwah is manifest in them. For Yahuwah hath shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and supernatural nature, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew Yahuwah, they glorified him not as Elohim, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their the foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible Elohim into an image made to corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore Yahuwah also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Okay. Oh, stop there.
Yeah. Okay. Man, I forgot about this part. This is pretty. This is a lot. But go ahead, brother.
What's interesting about this particular passage, to me, like everyone focuses on the next couple verses when it talks about homosexuality, specifically as a sin, which is interesting. But according to what it's saying here, him giving them up is a punishment for them not seeing him as creator.
Absolutely.
So him giving them up is the actual punishment, allowing them to go to themselves and be opposite of what they were made to be, because that's where it all starts. They denied him as creator, so they look at themselves and saying, I'm not supposed to be this. I'm supposed to do something else. I'm supposed to be something else, and And I think that that a lot more focus needs to be on that versus turning this passage into something it's not, because clearly it's a sin. You know, we can look at Leviticus and we can see what homosexuality is, but this is particularly saying that the punishment is turning them over to themselves to do those things because they denied that he was a creator. So that's one of the things I saw there.
Absolutely. The result, like when we see this form of wickedness, it's especially amongst people that it says clearly, know Elohim. So when you see this type of wickedness amongst people who say they know Elohim, it's a symptom. It's telling us somebody has already been given over to their vile ways. You see what I'm saying? If you're going to try to combine the two, that means that you've already been given over, you know, because it looks like the evidence. He's saying when you see this, it's because of this, you know. So it's pretty simple, but a lot of people they like to create some big giant thing from this when it's just keep it as simple as possible, because it shows us a lot when it's in its simplest form.
Absolutely.
You know, Wesley, you had your hand up. You wanted to say something?
I'm going to let you do it because I'm pretty sure you're going to cover the Godhead portion. So yeah.
Well, but go ahead. You could do it.
No, I'll leave it to you. It's better internet, you know, better internet.
Go ahead.
The other thing I saw though too, verse 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, the invisible things of him from creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power as well. So he's speaking, you know, and he's showing who it is that needs to be justified, right? First, who the sinner is, right? So it reminds me when we were going through Genesis and me, you, and Kai were running down all of the different animals and the intricacies and the platypus, and you know what I mean? And then you look at the DNA of a human. But then I talked to a colleague at work, you know, who's supposed to be this, you know, he has a doctorate or a master's in engineering and quantum physics, and he says, "Oh, you take the Bible literally?" Yeah. So you think the Big Bang created DNA? How? I said, "You're an engineer, right? How can anything that comes through the profession of engineering be done without first being designed? So then how can we be made without having a designer? You know, and it's clearly seen, you know, the stars, the moon, you know, when we look at the way plants look, you know, Yahusha said, you know, Solomon in all his splendor, speaking of the lilies, is not arrayed as one of these, because when you put it under a microscope, you can see how beautiful it is, the chlorophyll, the cross section, the depth of that plant, you know, and what it provides and what it does, and just nature in general, you know, and creation. We can clearly see it and deny it. You know what I mean? So,
no, absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. That's and does it say it here?
huh?
It says at the end of verse 20. It says so that they are without
Excuse.
So even though, you know, those people who are in that the profession, even in the medical field, you know, I'm using that term lightly, but when they initially begin to go into medicine, they study the body, anatomy, DNA, chromosomes, cells, and they a lot of times they come out different. It's not the same, you know, but there is those individuals who can clearly see and reject purposefully, you know. I'm gonna touch on Godhead after. I'm gonna let Mike go first. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so pairing up this verse, which one was it? Where he talks about the invisible things.
Verse 20.
Yeah, I pair up that verse with Paul. The other verse where Paul says that the law of Yah is spiritual. I use that for why I changed my perspective when I'm looking at scripture from, interpreting spiritual things through the physical to now interpreting, making the spiritual the primary instead of the physical the primary. Because because one thing I know, like my family says, who are churchgoers, which I hate the saying, but they say you can't make everything too spiritual. And another thing that I really hate is they say it's this old school saying, too heavenly minded is no earthly good. It's like, nah. So, but that's the flip though, because listening to this, he's literally saying you can look at the physical things and see the spiritual things,
right?
Because the spiritual things are the reality, and everything else that we have, every other physical thing we have, they're all supposed to bring us to the true understanding of reality, because this isn't the reality. Like you would say a dream isn't reality because you wake up from it. It has an ending. This physical world isn't reality because it has an ending, but the spiritual has no ending. That is the reality. And so everything that he's created here is for the understanding of reality. So I think having that perspective is extremely important, especially if you're going to try to understand spiritual things, but
Messiah said it. He said in John chapter 3 to Nicodemus, if you can't understand earthly things, how are you going to understand heavenly things? He correlated it together. The earthly things I'm talking about is in scripture. It's in nature. If you can't understand the earthly things I'm talking about, how are you going to understand spiritual things?
A good example would be going back to what you guys were talking about the grace thing, because if I'm looking from a carnal mind, and I'm not saying carnal as in sinful, even though that's typically what it means, but I just mean fleshly, earthly mind. If I'm looking at the scriptures through an earthly mind, I would see Messiah as a man, just like I'm a man. So I would say, well, if I'm a man and he was a man, and I'm not, grace isn't, I can't earn grace because I can't, I have sin, but Messiah is a man without sin. Wouldn't that mean he earned it? But if I'm looking at it through spiritual eyes and seeing that the physical is a representation, I would see how he likened him unto the animal sacrifice that he gave us, which is supposed to point to him. And if you look at like if you go back to Abimelech, right, with I think it was Abraham when he lied about his wife. It says that Yah closed up all the wombs in I think it was Egypt, including the animals. So there was no births, not even from the animals. Now, if you see, they were also given commandments to give the first of the flock, or the best of the flock, but also the first of the flock, because it was the first of the increase, right? Okay. So they were supposed to give the first because it's Yah who gave the increase. In other words, it's Yah that always provided the sacrifice. Just like on Mount Sinai I don't know if it was Mount Sinai, but with Abraham, he provided a lamb there. The point is, that lamb is, wasn't given grace. That lamb, that sacrifice is the grace that Yah provides for us. And that's the representation of Messiah. So what I'm trying to say is, if I'm looking at it earthly, I'm just seeing another man. But if I'm looking at it spiritually, I see that he is someone that Yah gave to us as a sacrifice. So he's someone that was given to us, So stuff like that.
Yeah. For Yah so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Absolutely. He gave him to us. He may send us to each other, but he gave him to us and for us. So that's definitely a difference. And when you look at Messiah, he had faith. He came to John the Baptist and submitted under his ministry, under John's ministry. He submitted himself under it to be ordained to move forward, to be baptized by him. Even John said, nah, I need to be baptized by you. And Messiah said, no, we need to fulfill all things. I need to submit myself under this ministry. I need to go through this ministry because you was ordained first. So even Messiah respected the fact that John was ordained first, and he was starting the way for Messiah. You know what I mean? And Messiah definitely had to believe that Yah sent John to go to John to be baptized. He had to believe first. So Messiah definitely demonstrated belief from the very beginning of his life and ministry. So we can't look at the works and simply just say, oh yeah, he's just doing. No, he's believing. He's believing from the very beginning. When he was on the tree, he believed. He believed while he was on the tree. He wasn't doing anything else but believing when he was on the tree. So we have to make sure that he's not being brought down to an individual just providing us with works that takes over our works. He is demonstrating how to believe and how to live in the Torah. The just shall live in them, it says in Galatians 3. So, we gotta not be, there's a lot of people getting confused with Messiah just being like us and just doing some earthly works. Like, absolutely not. Messiah was if he's our master, he's on the right side of Elohim. There's no way he doesn't get no honor, the same honor as me. No, absolutely not. He's my master. It's crazy. Crazy what's going on in these Bible classes these days. Rod and then the Mecca. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, so something you said, I forgot to mention. So you said when we were reading, you said they know, because you were talking about verse 18, right?
Verse 21.
Okay, verse 21. But look at verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
It says, for the wrath of Yahuah is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness.
Right.
Listen, they know, and that word hold is used in nautical terms where the helmsman holds the rudder so that the ship, he's holding it down. He's fighting against the current.
Right.
This is what they're doing to the truth.
Absolutely.
Suppressing it, pushing it down. They know it, but they're suppressing it to keep it from others and to lead their own way. And it's it led me to Ezekiel 33:11. It says, say to them, as I live, saith Yahuwah, Elohim, I have no pleasure in death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn from your evil ways, for why should you die, O house of Israel? And it's one thing, like you said, both of you and Mike were both talking about judgment starts in the house, and people are up in the house that are holding the truth down, man, suppressing the truth down. And, Yah forbid, let the thought perish from my thinking. Like,
oh yeah,
that not be us, and it's just, I'm looking at this. It's like every time we go through Romans, I see something different, like with the whole focus on, how we are to view the passage in light of those that refuse to believe that he was the creator. Then these things happen because he let them over to that mind. But these are the same ones that already know it, but yet hold it down.
Absolutely.
Willingly deciding, I'm going to go the opposite way. So
and that's why we're at the position to just give. Whatever we know, don't don't hold it, man. Just like the talent, the man that buried the talent, you had it. Remember when Messiah said the man came and talked to the guy with the one talent? He
Yeah.
said, you knew I was this way, and you kept it anyway and buried it anyway. You didn't even go and do what you were supposed to do with it. So that we have, it's so mixed that you can't just declare that someone knows. It's so mixed with people that know, people that don't know. But we gotta know. If you know and you hold in the truth, I feel bad for you. We need to be pitiful. We need to have pity, because look at what's in store for them. They're not only going to be given up to uncleanliness, their mind is going to be reprobate. They can't even recognize anything anymore. You see what I'm saying? So just because a person knew in the beginning, they may end up on some others, like believe in some crazy stuff because you have been given over to a reprobate mind. You know, you don't just keep the truth forever, you know, but you do recognize, hey, I was there and I turned away. And Hebrews talks about this too in chapter 10, where he talks about the person who tasted it, that was in it and turned away. And there's no more sacrifice for sins for that person, you know. So this is not just talking about anybody that's just doing the wrong thing. This is talking about people that know and they're purposely not doing what they're supposed to do, you know. So praise Yah that he warns us to not become like this description here, you know. And we can't even point at what the Christians, the camps, the Messianics, the Catholic. We can't even point to any specific person because we don't know what's in them, but we know what's in us. You know what's in you. So you make sure you're not doing this, so we can show other people how it looks when you're accepting everything that Yah says. You know what I mean? This is the whole point of this. I think Rod pointed it out. Make it personal. This is a personal reading. Like it's a letter. So this is to me. And everybody should say this is to me and read it in such a way, you know. But it also allows us to open our eyes and see others and warn them as well, you know, before it gets this far. Emeka, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so you know, just to what Rod was talking about, you know, what you guys were talking about, how, you know, everything just shows Abba, you know, and they're left without, you know, without excuse. If you go to you know, in James, you know, it talks about the tongue, you know, and he says, you know, can both blessing and curse, you know, he talks about can fresh water and salt water, you know, come out of the same, you know, stream. And so then he connects that with the mouth, like can blessing and cursing come out of, you know, should we be speaking basically out of the mouth, both blessing and curses? And so, you know, it's interesting because they know that there's power in the tongue. Like they know there's power in speech. All the studies they've done on, you know, the effects of words on people and how you speak, you know, what you say and how those things affect us. You know, they've even gone deep enough to even look at how those things affect molecules of water, you know. And so they know, it's like, because it confirms back with the scripture that, yeah, there was power in the tongue. Like there is, you know, power behind our words and what we say. And that's all connected back to the Heavenly Father. And they know these things. And so it's so interesting how you could even, you know, through your study, dissect things that you know can relate back to scripture and still choose to ignore the Father. And that's where it becomes a choice. You know, they make the choice to ignore Yah. They make that choice. And there is a oh man, I'm trying to see what the verse is. There's a verse in Hebrews. I cannot find it right now. I thought I know I have it written down somewhere. But yeah, there's a verse in Hebrews that speaks on, let me see, I got it right here. It's Hebrews 5. Hebrews 5, 1 and 2. So it says, for every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to Yahuah, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. And so, and then it says in verse 3, and by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer sins. So it's very interesting, because you look at Yahusha and you look at the fact that in today's society, like, you know, just speaking on the doctrine that you were bringing up now, there are pastors that know this. There are pastors that read the scriptures and they know, okay, well, he can have compassion, you know, on ignorance. You know, he can have compassion on ignorance, or he will have compassion on ignorance. So therefore, in their head already, they know, well, okay, so if we keep this is, and I'm not saying for, you know, but I know there's probably people who have had this mentality. Well, all right, well, if we keep them from knowing the truth, if we keep them from knowing the law and that they have to keep all these things, then we'll just bank on this compassion that he says he's going to have for the ignorant. You know, we'll just bank on this if we know that, you know, we'll just bank on, you know, this right here, and not teach them that they probably should be following the law or keeping the commandments, because once they start learning those things, then they have to, you know. But since he'll have compassion on the ignorant, then we can just teach people to ignorantly continue in their sin and pray that he has compassion. It's like, what kind of mentality is that? Like,
right.
You know,
Holding the truth in unrighteousness. Like it says, like they held it, they're keeping it.
Yep.
They're directing what you hear and what you see, knowing that there's more to understand. And we can't. It's like holding it for what? Like, it's either sugarcoating, being afraid, a whole bunch of different reasons that does not count you have holding the truth. You know, it's all unrighteousness. Go ahead, Ron.
So here's what a liar is. Like, these guys are liars, right?
Right.
Here's what a liar is against Yahuwah. A blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat that isn't there. The problem is, because they're liars, they find it. A blind man looking for a black cat that isn't even there, but they find it. That's lying to Yahuwah.
And knowing.
And knowing.
Can't grasp it. And I don't want to grasp it. And I don't think we should just want to grasp it. We should just not do it.
Right.
Just not do it. Because when we come in contact with anybody who's in this mindset, even a brother, we can steer to the right way. Let's be so focused on the right thing, you know, that we don't even know what that is. All we know is that's not the way, you know. So I can't even grasp what that is. And I don't ever want to know. I don't ever want to know that, you know. And from the beginning of my walk, this hasn't been it. You know, I've never been involved in any church leadership or anything like that where I had to formalize my way of dress or work. I didn't, you know, so I don't even want to know what it means to know something and then purposely just not tell somebody. It's just crazy to me, you know. But I can see that it's crazy to Yah too, that he'll give you over to a reprobate mind, you know. We're not going to finish this chapter because I want to dissect it and I don't want to rush through it because of time. But I want to finish this chapter and chapter 2 next week. So we're gonna come back to the Godhead point, Wesley. But I'm gonna let Mike go ahead before we close. I'm gonna let, if there's any closing statements, I'm gonna let people close the statements. So forth. You know, for we stopping at verse 24.
Hey, before we end, let's read from 16 to 24 in the expanded Greek too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I think this is another good point or spot to point out his mercy again too, because like even with the type of person that Mecca was, talking about, which obviously they do exist, and we may even be able to point some of them out, and even still, we still don't know what their end verdict is gonna be, because I believe it's these areas where it says, who knows the mind of Yah, because like he said, he'll have mercy on who he chooses, right? Because for instance, take Paul. Paul was doing these things, and according to his conversation with Messiah, he knew what he was doing too, because what Messiah say, how long you get a kick against the pricks? So as he was doing these things, Messiah was revealing them to him, whether through his conscience or whatever, but Messiah was clearly talking to him, because that was what he asked him. How long are you going to resist me? So Paul was doing what pretty much Mecca was saying, but he had so much mercy to the point to even reveal himself to him, but you can't expect that for everyone, because again, he chooses who he has mercy on. He calls out who he calls. And who is the potter or who is the clay to say to the potter, why have you made me for this? Whatever. That it's not up to us who he calls. So, but at the same time, we don't know who he's going to have mercy on. So this is why, going back to what you were saying, Jadiel, not withholding the truth from anybody, even to those who we believe know that they're doing wrong, it doesn't matter, because you may be that one that, Yah uses to give them that final prick that does wake them up, and that could be the next fall.
Right.
So the gospel goes to everybody. We're not here to judge the people. We're here to give Yah's judgment to them. Give the word to them, and let Yah be the judge. So I just want to point that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Good
Mike.
point, Mike.
Absolutely. We are just vessels used. We know what we're debtors for. We know what we're saved from. We know what we have mercy for. We know all the sins that we've done against Yah and the sins that we have been forgiven from. So all we know is that we're a debtor to give it to everyone else. Whatever Yah knows about that person is what Yah knows about that person. If Yah reveals it to us so we can give them that last message, then so let it be. Excellent exhortation, brother. Excellent. Brother Brian, and then Brother Kevin, and then Brother Rod is going to read.
Shalom. Yeah, excellent study, brothers. Yeah, Mike just took the words out of my mouth about that. Yeah, Paul was in that position of kicking against the pricks, as Yahuwah told him. But yeah, I was thinking about again that Matthew 23, where you're talking about holding the truth and keeping it from people and stuff. And it's like, that's what Yahusha told the Pharisees. That's what exactly they were doing. He said, whatever they tell you when they say Moses, see do or don't do as they practice. And they were teaching. He was saying that you shut the kingdom of heaven up against men. You either in yourselves, except for you suffered the children to go in, and they traversed land and sea to cover one proselyte. But when he had made him 2 more child held in themselves. And Yahusha talks about in the children, causing children to stumble. And I believe it's not just talking about physical, like natural children. But I believe it's talking about babes in Yahusha. When you're in that position of leadership and you are adopting lawless, false doctrines and causing his children to stumble, it's a serious thing. And Yah says it will be better that you were millstone tied around your neck and you're thrown into the sea.
Absolutely.
And for you to make one of my little children stumble. And so it's one of those things that is a warning for all of us when we're to search the scriptures, like the scripture says, search the scriptures even though you think you have eternal life, you have to make sure that our calling election is sure, and seek out with all our heart, soul, and mind. Pray for His wisdom and things. So that's all I want to say. Shalom, shalom, brother.
Shalom, brother. Praise Yah. Yeah, pray for his wisdom and guidance. Is the same thing that Solomon prayed for. The same thing each of us need to pray for. Solomon asked for wisdom to lead his people, and in turn, he was given all the necessary things that he needed to run the government as well. But the prayer, to pray for wisdom should be a daily prayer for each one of us, especially as men, leading siblings, little brother, little sister, leading parents, unbelieving parents, because we end up in situations where we're leading our parents. We have to recognize that we as men is a necessity. There's a need for men standing up for truth and not sugarcoating nothing. If it comes from Yah, it goes directly from Yah through me to you. It doesn't get stopped along the way, processed, pasteurized. It goes straight to the people from Yah. And we need to make sure that we're not, and we got to make sure that it's coming from Yah too. We need to not be presumptuous, thinking that everything we're feeling comes from Yah. We gotta make sure that we are men that Yah calls to be. We have to thank you for bringing that up, Brian, because now I want to kind of correlate as we continue to read back to men, because this is the men's study. So I wanted to bring it back to what we're supposed to be involved in this, because it's talking about teachers that's holding the truth, and men are the teachers of their family, teachers of the flock. So it is talking about men. It is talking about women also, but because women teach others as well, but men as leaders, we need to step it up and be established in the truth. Brother Kevin?
As usual, everybody's getting in on the act, and it leaves me nothing else to say. But that last, where if I can just say this one more thing, maybe that light bulb will pop on in so-and-so's head. Maybe that one more thing, and I'm conscious that I don't ramble, because that turns people off as well. But as everybody covered everything I was going to touch base on, except that, yes, if it was just that, if I say just that one more thing, that's going to be what make them go, hey, and that light bulb's going to come on, and, well, my work is done. Y'all are watering, and I'm through here. My work is done. But it's always that one more thing, and I have to wait for it to come. So I try not to ramble, but I always am hopeful that it's that one more thing that I can say that's gonna make that person's eyes come open or that light bulb come on. But everybody's covered. Everybody. This is the perfect group to be in. Perfect group, because everybody has their perspective.
Praise Yah.
Thank you.
What's that thing though? You said you had one more thing?
Yeah, that one more thing to say when you're witness to someone or you're talking to someone, and I don't want to ramble on and on and on and on, and they're still not getting it. So I try not to ramble when I'm speaking to someone and they're listening, but I try not to veer off. I try to say that one thing or that two things. I point to scripture, I give them an example,
right?
And I try not to ramble, because nobody wants to be preached to nowadays,
right,
for sure. So I always try to come up with that one more thing. I'm praying that Yah is going to send me that one more thing.
Right.
That one thing I can say.
Yeah.
just like in this case here, but everybody's covering it. So like I said, it's the perfect group to be in.
Yeah, but praise Yah for that. That's a good suggestion, is when we're sharing, like we've been talking about, not holding the truth in unrighteousness, but also being wise in what you present, so it's really interesting because sometimes Yah just wants you to say that one thing to the person rather than trying to give them the whole Moses, 5 books at once. Like, it's good to be wise in what you are presenting, and also temperate. You also got to have self-control when you're delivering, so I do I respect that suggestion. I think we all should take up that suggestion. Make sure that we're not rambling, that we're aware of how we're delivering the truth.
Yes, sir.
Praise Yah. Praise Yah. All right. And then we're going to close on the expounded Greek of the mysteries of the depth of the Go ahead, Brother Rod. This is Romans 1.
This is I'm gonna go. So we last read 16 to 24. So
yeah,
I'll read that. All right. It says, for I am not ashamed of the good news. For Yahuwah's power it is, resulting in salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile. For Yahuwah's righteousness, in it is revealed, on the principle of faith to faith, even as it stands written, and the one who is just on the principle of faith shall live. For there is revealed Yahuwah's wrath from heaven upon every lack of reverence and upon every unrighteousness of men, who in unrighteousness are holding down the truth. Because that which is knowable concerning Yahuwah is plainly evident in them, for Yahuwah made it clear to them. For the things concerning him, which are invisible since the creation of the universe, are clearly seen, being understood by means of the things that are made, namely his eternal power and divine being, resulting in their being without a defense. Because knowing Yahuwah, not as Elohim, did they glorify him, nor were they grateful, but they were made futile in their reasonings, and their stupid heart was darkened. Asserting themselves to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the uncorruptible Elohim for the likeness of an image of corruptible man, and of birds, and of quadrupeds, and of snakes. On which account Yahuwah delivered them over in passionate cravings of their hearts to be distilled, profligate, I don't know what that means, which had for its purpose the dishonoring of the bodies among themselves in their character.
That was so in depth that it pointed out stuff that we should have covered in other verses. So we may start from 16 next week to cover those other verses too, because verse 21 where it says neither were they thankful, definitely want to touch on that and many other points. So we're going to start from 16 next week, but hopefully we can cover 16 down and then also the whole chapter 2. But if not, let's take our time. But next week we're going to start at verse 16 and dissect this even more, because that you just pointed stuff out that I think needs to be emphasized on, So, all right, this is concluding Romans chapter 1, verse 1 to 16, I guess. All right, shalom, everybody.
Shalom, Akuti, and broheim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved accordingly. to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha and again shalom.